I don't have many of those, Heidi. That's why I said.
You're
All
not.
right, here we go. So today we're going to talk about solving square root equations. All right. Let's see. So I want to give you guys 3 important facts for the day. So 3 important facts to remember when you're solving square root equations. Take notes, boys. All right. So fact number 1. When you have a square root, the thing underneath is called a radicand.
A what?
Radicand? D. It's a D. Now, the radicand, as you guys may know, when you're dealing with square roots, if you want a real answer, the radicand has to be a positive number. In other words, it has to be greater than or equal to 0. Because if you have a number underneath that's negative, what happens to it? It becomes imaginary. And I said if we want a real answer, which is what we're going for today, the radicand needs to be greater than or equal to 0. So that's important fact number 1. Whatever's underneath the square root has to be greater than or equal to 0. The next thing, when you're solving these things, you can get something called extraneous solutions. Extraneous solutions. So here's a frustrating fact for you. You could do all your math right, follow all the steps correctly, and you're going to get an answer like x equals 3. You did it all perfect.
And it can still be wrong.
But that answer is wrong. And the reason it's wrong is because algebra is just a process we go through to do math, but algebra can't do a thinking for us. We have to do the thinking ourselves.
So is that why don't you make sense?
It's possible that the algebra creates a false answer, an answer that's not quite true. So, for example, here's an example of an extraneous solution. Suppose, don't write this, but just pay attention. Suppose somebody's making a graph. Over here we have the age of a person, over here we have their height. So before they're even conceived, they have no height. Then they start to develop in the mother's womb, right? And then they grow over time, and somebody thinks, okay, there's my dot, so I'm going to go like this. That's actually, it's true at first, right? But what's wrong with that model? Yeah? It never stops. So, you know, and do you grow at the same rate all the time?
No.
No, it's really fast in the beginning, right? And then eventually just stops. So we have to think, even though math does things for us, we still have to think about, do those things actually make sense? When it comes to solving square root equations, we're going to do something to solve those. But when we do that, it has the potential to create a false answer. And a false answer is the one that will make the radicand negative. Okay? So, since we have extraneous solutions, we need to check our work. It's always good to check your work anyway. But basically, you know, you didn't have to do that before. When you solve a linear equation, the answer you get, you followed all the steps correctly, is the right answer. And it's not a bad idea to plug that answer back in to see if you got it right. But for us, for these ones, you have to plug it back in. Otherwise, you get an answer, you get it perfect, but plug in, you say, oh my gosh, it makes the square root part negative. Can't have that. Throw it in. Okay? So, That's the second important thing. The third important thing is, what cancels a square root? What's the opposite of taking a square root? Squaring it. So squaring cancels square roots. So in other words, if you have this, the square root of x, if you square that, the square cancels the square root. Okay? So, 3 important facts. The radicand has to be greater than or equal to 0. It's possible that we'll end up with an answer that doesn't work, so we have to check our answers at the end to make sure it doesn't make the inside of the square root negative. And then also, finally, to when you're solving these, to cancel the square root, we're going to square both sides. Those are your 3 important facts for the day. So, let's go ahead and begin the process here. I'm going to give you guys some steps to solve here. How to solve square root equations. I'll show you what I mean by these in a minute, but get rid of outside numbers. So we're going to have some square roots. Some of the numbers will be inside the square root, some will be outside. You're going to start by getting rid of the numbers outside of the square root first, okay? The next thing you're going to do after that is you're going to cancel out your square root by squaring both sides of the equation. After that, you're going to solve. Easy ones to solve will just be like, get x by itself. The harder ones that we'll get to, you might have to do like the quadratic formula or factoring to solve them. But finally, this is where we would usually stop, but because of extraneous answers, what do we have to do? Check our answer. Because we want to make sure it's not an extraneous solution. Okay? And what stinks about it is you're adding on this whole extra step, and 95% of the time, your answer is just fine. But there's that one problem on your homework or on your test where it's like, oh, that was the one that's not supposed to be like that. So it's kind of a pain in the butt, but that's how it is.
So has that happened on any of our other tests?
We haven't dealt with extraneous solutions yet, no.
So I mean, the beginning amount of answers to be enough.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. We all make mistakes, Jonathan. I don't think we need to label ourselves. All right, let's see. So let's begin. Go ahead and write down example 1 here. We're going to talk about 3 different types of equations, but the steps pretty much apply to all of them, but you'll see different little things coming up in each one. But the same steps apply. All right, what was our first step? What did I say? Okay, what number's outside of the square root right now? The 4 is, right? So I'm going to get rid of that 4. So let's start by minusing that. Okay? Are there any other numbers outside the square root? No. Sometimes you have a number in front here. You know how to get rid of that one? You would divide it out. Okay? In this case, we don't have that, though. All right, what do I say to do after you get rid of the outside numbers? You're going to square both sides because we want to get rid of that square root now, right? So we're going to square this side, and whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So this square is going to cancel out that root, and I'm left with this now. And over here we have 64. What is step 3? Just solve. In other words, get the letter by itself. So minus 1 on both sides, and we're good to go. Now, before I circle my answer, what do I want to do? Check your answer. So let's take it and plug it in. 63 plus 1 plus 4. Now, I really only need to pay attention to this. You could check it all the way through if you want, but I just want to make sure this won't come out negative. If I add these, does it come out negative underneath? Then we're good. My answer works. Okay? But you can keep going if you want. this can actually tell you not only is your answer not extraneous, but if you keep checking all the way through and you get both sides equal, then you know you did it right. But what we definitely want to do is make sure that this doesn't come out negative. So now that I know for sure that doesn't ruin the inside, then I've got my answer. The answer is n equals 63. Bueno?
I don't know how to do it with this one.
All right, you guys try one. So my answer is x equals negative 5. Okay? All right, let's move on. So that's one type of problem. Let's take a look at another type here. Go ahead and write down this one, please. Write down this one. Yeah, example 2. Example. So it looks different, so it's worth talking about and treating differently, okay? But it's really not that much different. In fact, it's a little bit easier. Notice that there's no outside numbers. Everything's under a square root. So we just skip that step. So what do we do next? Square both sides. And basically those both cross off. And then what do? We solve. That's true. Now, John, what do we do to solve?
Oh, so I chose the 2a.
Yeah, so what you want to do, when you have x's on both sides, what you want to do is you want to find the smaller one and do that to both sides so that you get them together. So negative 2 smaller than positive 2. So I'm going to add 2x to both sides. So that way it cancels on the right side and leaves me with this. Yeah, you could, it doesn't matter which one you add technically, but if you move the smaller number, you're more likely to end up with positive numbers, which are nicer to work with. Now what?
You add 9 to the 17. So that's 26. Wait, whoa. 36.
It is 36. Good.
Okay.
Now what?
And x equals 8. Oh, 9.
Okay, and we want to make sure that it doesn't make the thing under the root negative. Now, I don't mind if you guys do this stuff mentally. If that's too hard, go ahead and do it by hand. But like I would look up here and think, okay, 2 times 9 is
18.
minus 17.
1.
Is there a square root of 1?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one. We're good. It just can't be negative. How about this one? Plug in 9 over here. 19 minus 18 is
Oh, yeah.
square root of 1? We're good. So you can just do that checking your work step mentally, or you can actually write it out. It doesn't really matter to me. Just make sure that you do it because you don't want to miss it. And yes, on your test, the way that the software works that I have, they will put the wrong answer on there along with the no solution answers. So you do want to check your answers because otherwise you'll accidentally bubble in the one that gives you the number you want. So we're good. It works.
So they don't have to be same.
Huh?
So they don't have to be same.
Well, in this case, they would, right?
We didn't have to test this week.
Yeah.
Wait, what? Are you kidding me right now?
I wasn't until you asked that.
I'm gonna kill myself.
I claim the legs.
Wait.
All right, your turn.
I'm going to take my own life before we go.
We're going to go ahead and discuss. So, Chris, what do I do?
Oh, what have I missed?
Okay.
Where are you supposed to live?
Okay, guys, if I could have you all quiet down a little bit, please. Quiet, please. Quiet. Eric, what's next, buddy? You could. We could do that. And that leaves me with 0 there, right? Okay. Alexis, what's next, bud? Want me to leave you alone there? Kenny, what's next? Okay. This one's weird looking. So let me tell you guys what I would do. I would move the 2 in over here. Now some of you guys might have done that first. It might have looked a little less weird if you did that first as opposed to the 3, but it doesn't matter. But if I do this over here, what's left? 0. With 3 minus 2 is 1 n. There's your answer. 0 equals n, or n equals 0. And if I plug in 0 up here, will that work for both square roots? We're good. So the answer is 0. Okay? Okay, go ahead. Did someone put a mirror in front of you?
Oh, that's messed up. They let me see you.
I'm just kidding. You're beautiful. Okay. Write down this one, example 3. Okay, here you go. So I want to share with you guys this thing. So first of all, let's look at our steps. Step 1, get rid of the numbers that are outside the square root. Are there any numbers outside the square root over here? No, so we can't do anything there. Let's square both sides, right? This is where something interesting happens. Now this cancels this out, right? That's easy. You guys remember that? That's a shortcut. I'll pause for 30 seconds. I'm going to let you guys do the shortcut. Go for it.
I don't remember
Nope, it's got 3 in it. When you have a binomial that's being squared, the shortcut, otherwise you have to do the box. The box works, but you square the first term, you square the last term, and it's always going to be plus because when you square a negative, it becomes positive. And then you multiply those together, so r times negative 2, and then you double it. So what's 2 times r times negative 2? That was our shortcut we learned back in our last chapter. Okay. Now I'm going to erase this because I want some space, but that's the trick. Okay, now here's the other weird thing. I'm going to highlight this. Shortcut. Here's the other weird thing. To solve this is different. You can't just get r by itself anymore. The reason you can't just get r by itself is because we don't have just r anymore. We have r and we also have r squared. When you have that, that's a quadratic. Now there's 2 ways you could do it. You could use the x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared. You could use that one if you want. Or you could just factor it. I'm going to go with factoring because I think factoring is easy. But you could do whatever one you want. All right, so write down this step. Since it's quadratic, since this is a quadratic, it's not just a linear equation. I've got a square in there. Since it's quadratic, move all terms to one side. Move all your terms to one side. So I'm going to move this over, and I'm going to put it under which of these? I'm going to put it under the 4, and then I'm going to move this one also, and I'm going to put that one under the what? The negative 4r. I'm lining up my like terms. You guys see? So these both cancel out. What's left over here? 0 equals r squared. Combine those. 4 minus 3. Okay. Now, here I want you guys to factor this. What method would we use to factor that? Multiple choice, ready? Box method or difference of squares? It's a box method. So try it out. Go ahead and do your box on that. See what you guys get. I'll give you like a minute or so. Pretty easy one. There's only one way you could get it, so guessing and checking is pretty straightforward here. Only one possible combination that would work. Joanne, did you get it factored? What'd you get? Yep, you get r plus 1 twice. If anybody wants to see it, I'll show the work on the side here. So you put your first term in the top left, last term in the bottom right. Look for two things that make r squared, two things that multiply to make 1. There's only one possible combination. It's got to be that. So there's your answer. Okay. Now what do?
Zero.
What? Who said that? Oh, you remember the word? Good job. So we're going to do this thing called the zero product property, where you take each one, you set them equal to 0, and you solve. On this one, it's kind of pointless because they're the same. But I'll still show my work that way. That way, when you guys look at your notes, you'll have a clue how to do yours. So we get r equals negative 1. I'm not going to check my answer this time in the interest of time, but it works. We're good. I can tell just by looking. If I plug it in, double negatives are going to come plus, and we're good. So, but there's our answer, r equals negative 1. So, two things that were different here. Ready? Since this side wasn't just one number, it was a binomial. When we square it, we have to use that shortcut. The other thing that was different is, since we had a quadratic, we need to move everything to one side and factor it to solve it. Okay? A little bit harder. See how you guys do. Make me proud.